report from the Commission of Inquiry into the prison and the riots. I didn't find much there. However, what I did find were a number of articles and books which reflect eyewitness reports from former inmates. I'll not attempt to quote such because I cannot be certain of their verity. However, what I will say is that if those eyewitness accounts even bear a modicum of truth, Glendary was a very dark place. There are allegations that the rights of people were being trampled upon. There are allegations of sexual assault and rape at the prison at the time. There would have been the genuine belief by those who were taken there, and they would have been aware that their offenses were penal, but they did not expect that it would be administered via penal means. None whatsoever. There were allegations of drug smuggling into Glendary and other nefarious activities, supported by those who should have been responsible, by persons in positions of trust. The words of Juvenal come to mind. I'll just use the English. But who will guard the guards themselves? Who will guard the guards? I have highlighted these things to suggest, Mr. President, that Glendary was imploding from within. It was imploding. It was a powder keg just waiting for something to happen. Criminals became victims of criminal activity in a place where they should have been rehabilitated. Some, a minority, who were expected to uphold the integrity of the institution, had abandoned their duties. Against this backdrop, Mr. President, I believe that Glendary serves as a sordid telegraph of the future for the other Glendary. The other Glendary, sir, is the one in which you and I live and move and have our being. Like the Glendary that met its demise in 2005, this Glendary can arguably be said to be one in which people can have their rights trampled upon. And we heard the impassioned presentation of Senator Moe this afternoon. This Glendary is one where persons can find themselves as outcasts in a society that nurtured them. This Glendary is one where people are told to become educated, but then they're still overlooked for jobs in this country, while others are brought in from overseas. While I speak of education, I wish to congratulate little Elena and Jeremiah, the two top students in our 11+ exams for this year, and indeed all the children who worked so hard during this most challenging time. They're all heroes. But like the Glendary of 2005, when persons work so hard and are told to excel, and they do it, and then they're overlooked in their country of their birth, they can lose hope in this land. In a similar fashion, like the Glendary of 2005, one is left to assume that persons in position of public trust and leadership within this Glendary, and again a minority, are also engaged in the types of nefarious activities that led to the demise of the Glendary of 2005. I call to mind the calypso by Edwin Yearwood, I think it was 1996, in which he talked about how things are brought into this country and who are the ones we should really be looking at. In his song, Something Greater Than We, he has a line which said, "The mind's description of drug pushers make them out to look just like we. But can drugs slip into a tight system without any authority? While small fries like we distributing it and taking life without mercy, take a good look at any system here. Do we look like authority?" That was 1996. He was speaking of drugs then. I believe in 2021 we'll have to speak about guns. Just this week, Mr. President, it was reported that 2 men pled guilty in an Atlanta court to smuggling 30 guns into Barbados. 30 guns into this country. That's just 2 they caught. My question is, who received those guns? Whose hands are those guns in now? And I've heard the argument, people say, but we have to defend ourselves because out there it's getting hard. We have procedures in this country through which you can gain gun licenses. Just like the Glendary of 2005, which met its demise then, the Glendary in which we live has people who are not interested in the well-being of this country. This Glendary, in similar fashion, is a powder keg. 2018 and 2019, respectively, saw over 40 more murders in this country. 2020 was a little better, but we had lockdown. We saw and read about brazen killings in broad daylight in one of our busiest shopping malls. I don't want to be facetious in so serious a matter, sir, but I would like to say that Barbados is unique in the sense that COVID may have saved lives in Barbados. In the past 2 weeks, we have seen murders in our community. And this is while COVID is wreaking havoc. We're going through a spike. But yet people are taking each other's lives with guns. Like the Glendary that met its demise in 2005, this Glendary is moving swiftly towards its demise from within. Our people have lost their sense of civics. Our people have lost their sense of citizenship. In this light, sir, while we're speaking about Glendary and its future use, let us look at what it is saying to us in the present. How can we use it right now? And I'm not speaking of the building, but I'm speaking of that which caused its demise. How can that be a lesson for us? I wish to make a plea to those out there who are engaged in gunplay in our society. Put down the guns. I believe that there should be a gun amnesty in Barbados. There are too many weapons in the hands of irresponsible people in this country. We cannot go forward like this. The society is too small. The society is too close-knit for that. If we fail to arrest this problem now, as it was not arrested when all the signs were there in 2005 in that Glendary, all the great plans that the BTI may have for the properties at Station Hill will be thwarted. I believe that Senator Grant spoke about the danger of crime to tourism when he spoke earlier. Let us not fool ourselves. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The road to recovery as COVID diminishes its effect amongst us will not be easy. It will be long and hard. Our economy, like most economies in this world, will have experienced irreparable damage in some areas. It will take a long time for us to even get back where we would have been before. What can help us is if we move forward as a cohesive society. But that will not happen if we do not learn from the demise of the Glendary of 2005. On the flip side, I encourage those persons in authority to invest in our people. Brilliant brains like Elena and Jeremiah and the countless others whose brilliance will be manifested in the next few years as they encounter new subjects are the ones who must be encouraged to stay here and contribute to brand Barbados and make it the best it can be. But that will not happen if we continue the same attitudes that led to the demise of the Glendary of 2005. It would be remiss of me if I didn't lend my voice to the plea of Senator Maynard as regard to vaccinations at this time. Now, I do not believe in mandatory anything, but I believe there are some things that can guide us in this life. There used to be an ad on television, sir, where you would see a man putting a lawnmower into the water. And the question would be, would you go fishing with a lawnmower? So why cut your lawn with a fishing line? There are horses for courses. There are professionals in every field. I would not go to a fellow priest who knows nothing about science to get a checkup for my body, because he's not trained in that. And in the church, particularly the Roman Catholic and the Anglican and the Lutheran, who use a portion of Scripture, a body of material called the Apocrypha, there's a particular reading that we use on October 18th, which is the feast of St. Luke the Physician. And if you will permit me, sir, I'll read a few verses. It is a book called Jesus ben Sirach, Jesus son of Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus. It was written sometime around the year 180 BC. St. Luke is the patron of physicians in the church. And this is the reading from Ecclesiasticus 38, verse 1 and following. Honor the physicians for their services, for the Lord created them. For their gift of healing comes from the Most High, and they are rewarded by the King. The skill of physicians make them distinguished, and in the presence of the great they are admired. The Lord created medicines out of the earth, and the sensible will not despise them. Was not water made sweet with a tree, in order that its power might be known? And he gave skill to human beings that he might be glorified in their marvelous works. By them, the physician heals and takes away pain. The pharmacist makes a mixture from them. God's works will never be finished. And from him, health spreads over all the earth. My child, when you are ill, do not delay, but pray to the Lord and he will heal you. Give your faults and direct your hands rightly and cleanse your hearts from all sin. Offer a sacrifice and a memorial to the Lord and pour oil of offering as much as you can afford. Then give the physician his place, for the Lord created him. Do not let him leave you, for you need him. There may come a time when recovery lies in the hands of physicians, for they too pray to the Lord, that he grant them success in diagnosis and in healing for the sake of preserving life. He who sins against his maker will be defiant toward the physician. Ecclesiasticus 38. Those are the first 15 verses. I've highlighted that to say, sir, that there are many Google doctors out there. But the reality is that we have trusted all these years the same physicians who are giving us advice to keep ourselves healthy. The vaccine is not perfect. Humanity has never eradicated a virus. That's what viruses are. It took us decades to deal with HIV. It was just about 2 years ago that they came up with a concoction that can lower the viral loads to the point where it cannot be transmitted. Our physicians have been working overtime. And we give thanks to God for them and for the progress they've made thus far. But I want to couch this within the context of a national consciousness. The more unvaccinated people there are in our community, the greater is the platform for the virus to spread and mutate. Yes, if you feel strong enough to live, think about all the little children under 12 who cannot be vaccinated. In a country where we have been talking for the past few years about the dangers of childhood obesity and early onset diabetes in our children. Think about them. Think about them when we provide a platform for new variants to mutate within our society. Our neighboring country, St. Vincent, recorded some cases of the Mu variant yesterday. I'm now hearing that we have some here in Barbados as well. I encourage us to think as a society. Think about the other person. The physicians have worked overtime, the pharmacists have worked overtime, our researchers have worked overtime. Our government has been stellar in this regard. Barbados was one of the first places to land vaccines in the Caribbean. And all of a sudden, we have become doctors ourselves and putting each other at risk. Let us remember why the Glendary of 2005 came to its demise. It imploded from within. It was destroyed because within, nobody really cared about the institution. There were some who were oppressed, so they couldn't care less. There were others for whom it was just a place where they could carry out their activities, their nefarious activities. And so nobody cared about it. There's still hope for this Glendary. And I encourage us not to let this one meet the demise of the last one. Let us do what is necessary to build the best society we can by being each other's keeper. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Rogers. Senator Liggins.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Mr. President, for the opportunity to speak on this bill. Let me first say here that I am definitely a person who believe in the preservation of history. And as we are told by the leader of government business, that requests for proposals have gone out by the BTII for probably joint partnerships in terms of proposals for the preservation of the Glendary prison. Barbadians don't seem to have a sense of history. They never want to appreciate their own, but you would be surprised, the same people who do not want to support the preservation of Glendary will even go to Rikers Island to visit the one that Nelson Mandela was in, because they would feel that that is more important to them to say that they would have visited Rikers Island than to say that we have preserved Glendary prison. And I am definitely supporting this bill because I support the heritage of Barbados. Some of you may remember or may know of Terrell Court, the home of Sir Grantley Adams. I haven't gone there for years now, because when I was at the Barbados National Trust, and I'll say that with pride, I would have gone there and you would see the license plates of Lady Adams's car still there. You would see the history of a lot of things Sir Grantley did right there at Terrell Court, Mr. President. And we have to preserve not only Terrell Court, but we have to preserve other historic buildings of Barbados. I'm happy to say that Culloden Farm is being restored, and it will be used by the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. These are things that Barbados has to preserve for future generations. I can tell you that history is not something that a lot of young people are interested in, because they think it just started with them 20 years ago. And things that are of historic value, they mean nothing to them, absolutely. People talk about this whole question of literacy. Literacy does not only mean being able to read or possibly to write. It also means knowing your history, knowing the history of Barbados. And I can tell you, in countries all over the world, they have museums to celebrate every single aspect of their history, every single thing. And as you know, and I'm speaking primarily of the United Kingdom, they have probably over 100 museums there, preserving their history, whether it is with the wars, with the royal family, preserving just about everything. And now that I mentioned the royal family, I'll just digress for 1 minute, sir, as we go to this whole question of a republic. People are thinking, well, we're going to a republic, so let's wipe out the history. We can wipe the history out, which is the history of Barbados becoming an independent nation, and all the work that would have been done by that Independence Commission, way back in the early 1960s. People are thinking, oh, why should we be paying homage to a white person in England and all that? We don't have to go to that level of disrespect where our history is concerned. We are moving to a republic because we are completing the independence chapter. But there's no need to destroy and denigrate, members of the royal family, or that old white person in England. We have to do this. We having our own color. There's absolutely no need to do that. It is the same thing with every single aspect of our history, and that is why a lot of the times young people are so totally unaware of what has happened, and they have to go to Google to find this information. But if this information is preserved in museums, they can go there at these particular museums and find the particular aspect of the history of Barbados. And I would say that in relation to the preservation of Glendary Prison, that maybe you can commission somebody, the guy who owns the wax museum, and let him make wax figures of our most infamous prisoners, that people in the next couple years can come there and say, oh, this is what Winston Hall looks like, or that's what Denzel Roberts looked like, or that's what Buddy Brathwaite looked like. Oh, and I remember Superintendent Harewood. He was the one that used to give all the port. I think that wax museums, wax figures, should also be part of this new Glendary, because that is also a way of preserving the history. Now, I know you probably don't think it's a great idea, but you can probably have a wall of the previous superintendents, previous staff members. You can also have one speaker, I think it was Senator Greenidge, he was saying that all 3 buildings don't have to be the museum. But I would say that you would have to show the bakery, show the farm, because coming and visiting the farm with all the pigs and the cows and everything that were raised at Glendary, all those things should be preserved, and people visiting, they can make what we would call an outing out of it, Mr. President. And that is the only way that you can, and then obviously with the use of the technology, you can more or less put the story of Glendary Prison on video. Just like when you go to Harrison's Cave, you can see, you can do a virtual tour before you do the actual tour. I think that you can have that type of putting the technology, marrying the technology with history. And I think, Mr. President, that would be a great way of preserving Barbados' history. And as we speak to the whole issue of Africa and their prison where Nelson Mandela was, as you know, yesterday we had the big Africa CARICOM summit. And Mr. President, I would say kudos and congratulations to the Prime Minister and others in Africa who planned that summit. And one of the big things that came out of that was master agreements, so that at least we can have air travel between the continent of Africa and Barbados, and they will be bringing visitors in who can then come and visit our prison. So heritage tourism, Mr. President, is a huge thing in Africa, on the continent, and in the UK that I can speak to personally. And this is one way that we can improve our foreign exchange. We talk about, diversifying our product, and this is a huge, huge way of diversifying the product. Now, what I've realized in terms of, I think I was trying to inquire earlier, Mr. President, if Station Hill was part of the UNESCO area. I'm not sure it extended that widely. But I'm saying that when the garrison, the whole Glendary prison is renovated and put to use, maybe we can apply to UNESCO World Heritage Site to have an extension, going right at Station Hill, and that would give it a lot more credence and obviously good marketability for that product. Now, speaking about restoration of buildings, there are a number of buildings I noticed around the garrison, Savannah, especially where the Caribbean Examinations Council, the CXC buildings. I noticed that a lot of those buildings are going to ruin. And at some point in the past, those buildings were renovated to accommodate offices. But now I see all those historic buildings around the said garrison, Mr. President, they are rotting down. So I think that we need to pay a little bit of attention, Mr. President, to those buildings as well. They can be converted, might be an extension of our present museum that's around the garrison, because they're getting tighter and tighter for space. But as you leave it unattended for such a long period of time, you would have to spend more money on the preservation, bringing the buildings back up to scratch. So, Mr. President, I thought that I wanted to let Barbados know, whoever are in the hearing of my voice, I support Glendary Prison being preserved for the history of my children, and their children's children. Because you want to hear something? I know people talk about historians, and you would find out that 50 years from now, wait, what was there before? I can't remember. Maybe let me check Dr. Google. But and this is what we're talking about, documenting. And if we have to document all these things now, because believe you me, Barbados is moving at such a rapid pace now. And I noticed that we're not documenting. We probably will have to speak to the KFL campus and all the professors there of history to continue to preserve this history for our Barbadians, because a lot of times you hear, even on the program that is going on now, names of famous places in Barbados, and people were like, it used to name so? Because people will forget in 25 years. And we need to document a lot more of our history now, not just talk about it, so that in the years to come, we would have a legacy to leave. And as I said, just like it is in the UK, because they celebrate everything, they restore everything, they preserve everything. But you know what? I find that we are mash up and buy back society. We like to lick down everything, forget how it get there. And I would not want to see Glendary with its historic walls and lovely arches and everything demolished. That building has to be preserved. It has to be preserved. The history is not a great one in the sense that it housed prisoners, but there's a prison in every country. But there's something very significant and historic about it. And I can refer you all to Sir Henry Fraser's article that he wrote, I think it's in Barbados Today, and have a good read of it. And it shows you that there's some people who are still interested, Mr. President, in the preservation of the history of Barbados. And I will say to you, I, Althea Biggins, unreservedly support the fact that we're going now for proposals to restore Glendary Prison for the future of Barbados. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Senator Drix.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've had an interesting debate so far around this resolution. I was not expecting to be here this long, or to speak, rather, but I will make a contribution to the debate. Mr. President, we've heard arguments for and against the conversion of the site that is being invested to BTII. And I want to say that I believe, based on the information, as scanty as it may be, I believe that it is the opportunity for us to create a legacy project. Sir, it gives us the opportunity to pivot in a new direction as it relates to what the acting leader of government business alluded to this morning, community-based tourism. And that is where I think that this project really has the opportunity to mark a shift in the type of tourism that we offer here in Barbados. So, and I say that because one of the things that I would propose is that if we're moving towards this becoming some type of visitor center that is based on community-based tourism, for instance, that we really take advantage of the mythology of Winston Hall. That can be something that we use as a value creation, as a value proposition for Glendary Prison and the repurposing of it. Because that is how folklore and tradition and these things of historical importance become embedded in what a lot of tourists deem as places to go and visit. So for me, that is where I see this proposition going. Mr. President, it then also allows us, if it is done right, to move away from what I call mass-based tourism to some extent. Because clearly the trickle-down economics that is primarily based on a lot of people coming to Barbados, a few persons earn a large share of the income in the tourism sector, that it allows us to move away from that type of economic structure and model, and more persons who are at the ground level are allowed to partake in the economic activity of this type of project. So essentially, it should be something that is inclusive, environmentally sustainable, and it creates community, a new and purpose, a sense of purpose for communities, and also in the creation, it should assist in the creation of generational wealth for those persons who live in the environments that are near to Glendary Prison. Mr. President, we speak a lot about sustainable tourism, and the reality is, if we take all factors into consideration, we do not have a sustainable tourism product. Firstly, it is a mature product, and there are diminishing returns to investment based on the tourist spend that comes to Barbados from the economic side. And then you have, on the environmental side, if you take a drive along the west coast of Barbados, for instance, this is a guesstimate, about 85% of that coastline is taken up by infrastructure primarily for tourism. So there are very few windows to the sea along our west coast, and the south coast is quickly also becoming in danger of this type of aesthetic where the natural environment is being eroded for commercial activity. Sir, and it doesn't stop there just on the land side, but important ecosystems like seagrass. A lot of our seagrass beds are literally non-existent because of a lot of the pollution that runs off into the ocean from a lot of land-based activity. And our mangroves, we only have about 4 or less hectare acres of mangroves left in Barbados, and I presume that because of the infrastructure that was put up recently on the south coast, there was one of the main operating and functioning mangroves on the south coast that is now gone as well, all in the name of tourism development. And some would say, yes, we need to do these things because we need the money. But at some point, as I said earlier, there will be diminishing returns because tourists come here because we are an island, because we offer sun, sea, and sand relaxation. There still needs to be some type of authentic natural environment for tourists to take advantage of. Mr. President, clearly then there has to be a balance going forward. There has to be a balance with capital interests along with societal upliftment and well-being. And if we look at the traditional tourism product, which is primarily along our coastal urban corridor, which is the west and south coast, things like access to beaches have always been an issue in our society. In 2019, we had the unfortunate incident where emergency responders could not get on the beach because of a locked gate on the west coast. Until we fundamentally understand where we want to go with our tourism product and how we regulate it, if we are to say that it is for Barbadians and the benefit, the real benefit of Barbadians, whether that be monetarily or culturally, these are the types of things we have to look at going forward when we talk about sustainable tourism. Sir, and in striking that balance, I believe that we have to have an overall ethos and vision for tourism. I have not heard it expounded by the acting leader of government business, who is also the Minister of Tourism, in any succinct and clear way. Maybe I will get that response later on in the debate. But I believe that it has to be, we are able to sustain our economic needs, Mr. President, and our obligations, yet at the same time being of benefit to Barbadians. It cannot be that we are foregoing things like what a lot of Barbadians believe are their fundamental right to access to beaches in the name of capital interests. So, sir, one of the things I would also like to ask, now that we're discussing tourism and things like heritage tourism and what type of tourism we're talking about today, is the government of Barbados promised the people that we were going to look at the rebranding or the changing of our tourism slogan. I do not believe that we've heard yet any update on that, which was a controversial topic in the media. And I think that now would be an appropriate time, if that information is available, that we have some type of update on where that slogan is, what is the progress as it relates to the committee. I think that would be an appropriate discussion for us to have in this debate. But, sir, I will say something here that may be a bit controversial. As much as we have relied on tourism, I want to say for the last 40 years or so, because a lot of the degradation that happened on the west and the south coast of the island happened in the 80s to clear the land for tourism development. So let's give or take the last 40 years that we've really relied on our tourism, this mass tourism product that was basically embedded in 21st century economics and policy. Sir, I think that what we will also need is a new type of policy framework that speaks to tourism in the 21st century. Because given the fragility and the vulnerability of the tourism product, as we've seen throughout this COVID pandemic, we need new drivers, obviously, to sustain and carry the Barbadian economy forward. Sir, and I say that because there clearly then needs not just to be a diversification of the economy. Many persons say that, and to this day people say, no one has offered a substantive alternative to the tourism product. But I also think because we've tied ourselves to tourism so much, we need to probably divest away from tourism as much as we have for the 21st century. Sir, I say that because when we have economic indicators, like a gross public sector debt as of June 2021 of $13 billion, and an economy that was valued of just about $9 billion last year, In my mind, I do not believe that 21st century mass tourism, yes, it may give us a little leeway in the short term. I will not fight that argument. But I do not believe in the medium to long term. That is what will carry us forward. Mr. President, I believe that there has to be an emergence of a new entrepreneurial, and I emphasize this, although it may be evident, a new entrepreneurial and Black business class in Barbados. Sir, and that should not be a controversial statement because more than 90% of Barbados is of African descent. And as Senator Wiggins rightly alluded to just now, we had the inaugural summit of CARICOM and Africa, where, Mr. President, I am hoping that that is where a lot of our energy and our time and our investment goes towards not just bringing visitors from Africa, but I believe that is now the gateway for us to expand the Barbadian economy and market so that those young Black entrepreneurs who reside in Barbados, who have a difficulty expressing their creativeness because of the confines of the market that they exist in, now have the opportunity to freely move and do business with our African brothers and sisters, Mr. President. So, sir, this resolution clearly, as I said, for me, should be a shift, yes, in how we view tourism. And I believe that the request for proposal, and this is in my humble suggestion, one of the main criteria by which to judge those proposals by is the amount of community-based involvement in those proposals, because it is in the middle of a community in Station Hill, Mr. President, and we have to start by our actions showing Barbadians that they can get, as was said earlier, a piece of the action. This is a tangible way by which the government of Barbados can say to those persons in those environments, one of the key criteria for those proposals going in for this type of investment now for repurposing Glendary is the involvement of those in the community. And sir, I say that because we say a lot of things and a lot of people believe around the country that it is just lip service. And if we can make those very clear policy messages to the people of Barbados, I believe that there would be a greater uptake of confidence. Because a lot of the times people believe that politicians, yes, say one thing, but if you show them through action, then your actions will speak a lot louder than your words, Mr. President. So, sir, for me, I believe that there should be clear and decisive action towards what I call Barbadian economic liberation. Because I think what COVID has shown us is that it is not even enough to share the ownership. I think we've come now to a place where people must feel that they operate and do business in a country that is by them and for them. And that is why I use the word liberation, because a lot of persons in Barbados do not feel that they are free to participate and own wealth in Barbados without being confronted by what I call the traditional owners of capital and how the system protects those individuals, and they shut out a lot of business or new and emerging businesses. And if we can take a project like this that is steeped, what I consider, sir, steeped in class division and colonial legacy, and move it away from that, where we rightly say to those persons in the community, this is your piece of Barbados tourism sector. You are now the owners and a part of the driving force behind changing the face and the landscape of the tourism product of Barbados. Sir, so I end by saying there clearly needs to be, and it's possibly being worked on in the ministry, I'm not sure, but a new vision for tourism.
Not being worked on.
We have a lot of, in this COVID environment, a lot of webinars and meetings and so on, but a clear vision, Mr. President, for what the tourism product of Barbados looks like in the next 5 to 10 years, given the changing global environment, Mr. President. And sir, I think that that type of vision should be seeking to express what I call our true identity. Senator Rogers spoke about the need for a sense of civics and duty and responsibility. And I want to add to that, that the vision for tourism should also foster and promote a higher collective national consciousness. And it can't just be fancy slogans. It has to be embedded in the psyche of every Barbadian. And it has to be driven by tangible outcomes that they can see that they are truly a part of this sector. Sir, I recently read a book, and I'll end here, but I want to say this. I recently read a book by Ambassador David Commichon. I don't know if the goodly senator on the other side, who is steeped in all things education, if he's read it yet. The book is called The Pan-African Love Story of Arnold and Mignon Ford. And we talk about heritage, legacy, you know, the historical assets that we have. Sir, I read that book and I was amazed, completely amazed at how two Barbadians were one instrumental in Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association and the movement of the consciousness of African descendants in the diaspora. And the educational system, sir. Arnold Ford, he was literally Marcus Garvey's right-hand soldier, if that is what I could call him, based on the writings of Ambassador Commichon. And how many Barbadians, sir, know of these types of stories?
Commichon didn't make it up.
Sir, I'm hearing asides, sir. I am hearing asides.
By definition, I do not hear them. So I've not heard Senator
Good,
Franklin.
sir.
I've
I
not
am
heard
wrapping
Senator
up,
Franklin.
sir. I am wrapping up. Sir, and his wife, Mignon Ford, she was one of the key educational figures in developing the education system in a post-occupation Ethiopia after Italy. And it struck me in reading that I believe that Barbadians do not know who they are. Because if these types of stories were taught to 3- and 4-year-olds in a way that obviously that they can understand, this issue about identity, this issue about crime, the issue about broken homes, the issue about not being able to have a collective unification across Barbados, I believe, sir, that is half the work. Because Barbadians are right now in an environment where, because of the economic hardship, They don't know where to turn.
Mayor.
Sir, and I honestly, after reading that book, felt a different sense of pride and a different sense of responsibility that we must do more for the next generation. We have to. And it cannot be by lip service. I am not in a position, I am not in government, but I will make it my personal responsibility, Mr. President, that whenever I stand here, regardless of if I am in a party or not, Mr. President, I am Barbadian. And we have hit rock bottom because of COVID. And any suggestion, policy, framework, but we need to work together and we need to do it genuinely. Because a lot of the times we come and we hear from whichever corner it is a message, but it has ulterior motives. And do not be fooled, Barbadians know. They know when there's an ulterior motive. They're not stupid. And that type, sir, that type of behavior will not redound to anyone's benefit in this country. So, sir, as I said, I was not even planning to speak today, but I duly hope that the BTII, now given this property, can mark it now as a beacon of hope, a signal that the average Barbadian has a stake in the tourism sector and not just be a maid, not just be a ball boy, not just be a pool boy, but they can be owners of the foreign exchange that comes into this country that they are citizens of. Mr. President, I'm a...
Thank you very much, Senator Driggs. Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I must apologize to my colleagues as I had to step out for a short moment to attend to other matters. And, Mr. President, I'm sure it has been said, but it's amazing the discourse we're having about the vesting of land. When I read the resolution, Mr. President, and it ends with, let's just take the salient parts, parcel of land, the property of the Crown, so it's already owned by the government, Mr. President, situate at Station Hill in the parish of St. Michael in this island, and more particularly described in the schedule to this resolution for the public purpose of tourism development. So we got a lot to say. We have a lot to say about tourism development, sir. We've had a lot to say about the schedule, and sir, we lawyers would have fun with the description and what it says, but we're talking about Her Majesty's Prison Glendary. And sir, I like the dialogue and I like what is being said. I personally appreciate the position, and I could almost sympathize, because I can't empathize because I don't have that responsibility or level of responsibility with the minister responsible for moving the legislation, who simply came and indicated quite properly that we're trying to vest the parcel of land and the buildings thereon into an entity to allow it to be developed for a tourism purpose. And here we are, having a vibrant discussion. But this is what makes it part and parcel of having a democratic society, and a society in which we encourage the discourse. So I said, let me add my small voice to the dialogue in the hope of bringing perhaps a slightly different perspective, sir. Firstly, sir, when we say request for proposals, we like it, we appreciate it, we understand what it means. But this, like everything else, is subject to certain maneuvers, Mr. President. And we would urge those with the responsibility, the power, and the wherewithal to review these RFPs to make sure that they have the diligent servants of the crown to ensure that what needs to be done to ensure transparency, accountability, etc., 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 is invoked. Invariably, sir, will we see the same players over and over? Only time will tell. But we say RFPs and we understand, and we hope that we may see what good comes from it, Mr. President. We have heard the discussion, sir, with the allocation of small business facilitation. We've heard about tourism, community development. We've heard about employment within the community. And we've heard, of course, well, let's give them more, not just employment, but we want a stake and interest. Now, sir, we can say, well, that stake and interest is certainly granted because it's being vested in a government entity. Then we have heard, sir, that there are persons who say, well, okay, we still want to encourage some diversification of ownership. But frankly speaking, if you're saying to someone, come and develop, there may be some reticence to say, well, come and develop with X and Y and Z. However, wishes are horses, sir, and we can certainly aim for the egalitarian society in which all these needs are canvassed, developed, and met. Simply put, though, I believe that the message is being sent that perhaps we broaden our scope and perhaps we broaden what we say is the dream and the ambition to the young Barbadian to not only play a part or to have a job or to have a business, but we're saying, come and be a part owner, even if it's a small parcel. Just a thought, Mr. President. We had a discussion, sir, and it's interesting to see the different personalities with regard and perspectives with regard to the history of Glendary, colonial prisons, whether we should raise them, sir, divest them from our history, sir. And I'm sure, even though I did not hear it, that my brother, Senator Rogers, would have indicated that we cannot run from whence we came. And in seeking to eradicate or make palatable our past, are we in danger of failing to learn certain lessons? But the point of the matter, that's not what we're discussing here. We're simply discussing the vesting. So by all means, go ahead and vest. What we must be cognizant of, though, is that after it is vested and any development that is done, we'll have to take consideration. And this is the dialogue part. This is the dialogue part of all the different parties. After the divestment is done, and you have the RFP and the entity is selected which takes it forward, now is the time for the dialogue for how it will be considered. Let the voices be heard. We could raise part, we could raise half. Allow the colonial structures to remain, because there is a beauty in the struggle and in the sadness from whence we've come. The colonial prison that we have here, sir, is markedly similar to one in Spanish Town, Jamaica. And sir, in a previous existence, I found myself working as a young, not even a lawyer, a Mackenzie friend as such, in an inquiry when the Jamaican regiment were sent, and allow me a slight digression. The Jamaican regiment was sent to take care of the prisoners at Spanish Town prison. The problem is having soldiers guarding prisoners. One would have thought would have been apparent, but long story short, Mr. President, it didn't end well. And when we were visiting that prison site, the similarities, because they're all colonial structure, between Spanish Town and Glendary were quite apparent. These are and were horrific structures, and recognizing their initial purpose with regard to the stated objectives of ensuring that colonial subjects remained in the darkest of places while being sanctioned is a harsh reality. It's a harsh reality and one we have moved away from. Some will say violence begets change and is necessary, but that gets into semantics, sir. One we have moved away from. But what we can't move away is the past. You cannot change what has been done. You can change your future depending on how much you believe in predestination and how much you are willing to accept, requiring effort from yourself. So, sir, in my personal view, we should be able to look back at these structures and see what the people have endured. However, this is not the time for that discourse. Allow the persons who win the RFP or the entity who wins the RFP to have public consultation and let us move forward. Let the voices be heard then as to what we do with this parcel which has attracted such great debate. But sir, I'm going to allow you to watch me do a bit of a tap dance here, sir, as we discuss prisons. And as we discuss the topic of Glendary and prison, sir, I want to talk about another prison, which is the prison that we find ourselves in terms of the COVID pandemic. And a short segue. Sir, we had an outbreak in the prison, and I think we should give kudos to Minister Abrams, who I know personally, but they were able to ensure that there was no loss of life of the prisoners at dawn, sir. And I think that is very important and should be recognized and commended. He who feels it knows. And sir, within the question of the prisons, then we get to the concept raised of, well, should we perhaps then, to ensure that there's no loss of life, now watch me, sir, Mr. President, I'm talking about prisons. To ensure that there's no loss of life within the prisons, mandate that prisoners be vaccinated. So, Mr. President, where I say this is that recently I have had to hear of different concerns and different perspectives with regard to how we safeguard the prison population. I have also had to hear concerns and perspectives with regard to how certain Barbadian citizens feel with regard to the treatment when they are required to isolate. Some almost compare it to being in prison, Mr. President, and I'm walking this line. Now, sir, within the context of the prison society, sir, the vaccine debate has been long-ranging and has become particularly circular. And these positions, Mr. President, are firmly entrenched. I have heard Senator Maynard today, sir, but the fact of the matter is, we are debating, but we always need to be conscious of the future and our future self. So, sir, we have a situation, and allow me a slight privilege. We've had a wonderful start on the uptake, and we have reached a stage where the percentage of vaccinated persons are now at 35. There's been ongoing consultation. The same consultation we're asking for now. There's been ongoing consultation, Mr. President. And we recognize that in politics, you have to allow persons to voice their opinion. However, in my personal view, sir, in my personal view, the simple situation is this. We are here discussing a prison and vesting. But sir, we are literally in a prison right now, and we need to bring the necessary legislation to allow us to escape. That's the simple fact. The government, Mr. President, has done and given equal opportunity. There's been massive education. But simply put, there's a mobaton of legal opinions. Everyone has a perspective. And what I wish to say, Mr. President, and I wish it to be noted, and I know I'm reaching the end of this rope that you've given me, sir, is that we must quickly bring the legislation to allow us to escape from the prison of COVID. This government has passed legislation swiftly in the past, extremely swiftly. And it's time to do so again. We can educate, we can vaccinate, we can even softly, indirectly mandate. But Mr. President, we simply cannot afford to wait. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Boyce. Senator Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't even know what to say. I almost wasn't willing to rise after that intervention because I was preparing to say, up until that last statement, that I was very supportive of all that Senator Boyce had said. And I was thankful that he brought his legal acumen and demonstrated a complete understanding of the process of submissions of an RFP, and that he had demonstrated that an invitation to an RFP process could not provide any kind of specifics as was being required by the members of the opposition, because by definition, how could we, when being asked to be transparent, to be upfront, to give people an opportunity to make recommendations on what is to be done, come and make a pronouncement on what we were going to do, while at the same time telling you what we want, to come to the table and make a recommendation on what you would. The two things are actually counterintuitive. So I was actually surprised to hear that from one of the two opposition senators. I was not surprised to hear it from one, but I was very surprised to hear it from the other, who I'm convinced knows better. But I digress. So I was very happy to hear Senator Boyce's contribution, but I could not have gone with him on the second part of that journey that he was allowed. But Mr. President, I want to first of all thank all of the honorable senators in this chamber for their contributions on this debate. I do accept, as was said by Senator Boyce, that perhaps when we started the debate today, I thought that we would have been out of here very early, and we would have all been able to go on to the other matters of business that occupy us on a day-to-day basis, but that was not to be. And I think it's been an important debate, Mr. President, because it demonstrates that there's a wealth of knowledge, wealth of commitment, wealth of inputs that are available in this chamber that I am always proud to be a member of. So let me start first, Mr. President, by attempting to respond to the queries that were raised throughout the course of the debate, just for the purpose of seeking clarity, and then bring the debate home. Mr. President, I came today, and I always present certain things up front whenever I'm required to lead in a debate, and I leave things for the end because I knew that they will come back in handy. But Mr. President, we spoke, I believe it was Senator Grant and Senator Greenidge spoke about Nelson Mandela and Robben Island. I've had the privilege of visiting Robben Island. But more importantly, I've had the privilege of visiting the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg, where, Mr. President, it is built using blocks from the old prison, which once housed the first prison in Johannesburg that Nelson Mandela and others were. And I still have photos where there are writings on the wall where the Constitutional Court, the highest constitutional court of South Africa, pays homage to its history of apartheid, the fight for freedom and liberation, by anchoring itself in the foundation of what used to be a prison, built with blocks from what used to be a prison. And when you go to the Constitutional Court, you are also able to go down into what was the old prison and to see where Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners that formed part of the ANC at the time were housed and held for their beliefs. But that is not unique. It is the most well-known. There is a place called the Bargello Museum in Florence, Italy. It is one of the most extraordinary sites in Italy. It is a former prison. The Four Seasons Hotel in Istanbul, Turkey, is a former prison. The London Reformatory in Lorton, Virginia, is now an arts center. It is a former prison. The Fremantle Prison in Australia was built by former prisoners. They used their labor. They came on a convicted ship in 1850. That facility is now a heritage museum. It is a former prison. Alcatraz, spoken about by Senator Grant, San Francisco, not much less acreage than this, 22 acres of land. That was Alcatraz, closed in 1972. Today it is a museum. Mr. President, there is a long and global history where prisons, former prisons, are refurbished, repurposed, and transformed and made fit for purpose into something else. And they are made transformative. We have, Mr. President, an opportunity here to use the Glendary prison and convert it from what it once was into what it can be. Senator Maynard, I just have one thing to say in response to what you have raised. Obviously, I don't agree, and I've just given a long list of other instances where prisons have been used differently, but I just want to say this one thing to you. We will make it out of this pandemic. I say that through you, Mr. President. We will. Barbados will, our people will make it out of this pandemic. And I agree with both Senator Rogers and Senator Maynard about the importance of us doing the right thing. Mr. President, I know that there are many, and I sit in a seat that is warm. Warm, not hot. I deliberately say warm. It could be other things, and it often is other things, but you know, we have to soldier on. Mr. President, this month, in 2019, Barbados recorded 60,000 visitor arrivals. This month, in 2021, Barbados recorded 10,000 visitor arrivals. July 2019, May, June, on average, 50,000 arrivals. In Barbados, we went from 7,000, and the highest per month we have reached has been 10,000. The only thing that makes those numbers look more palatable, Mr. President, is if we look at 2020. In 2020, the corresponding periods would show you something in the vicinity of 3,000, 2,000, maximum 3,000, but it even went as low down as under 1,000. Mr. President, the question on vaccination, testing, wearing your mask, social distancing cannot be sufficiently stressed in this moment. We are here, we are social distance, and so yes, I'm not wearing my mask while I speak. However, the reality of it is this. This is the reality. There are thousands of Barbadians, the Barbadians of whom we speak. 22,000 of them certainly who are indirectly employed in the tourism sector, who are depending on us to get those numbers up, who want to get back to work, who when they talk about whether school is going to begin or not, and Senator Springer and the Minister of Education have already made the announcements about being online. But they have to talk about what they're going to do with their children. Some of them want to be able to buy devices for their children. They want to be able to have a normal school experience like I had when I was going to school and my child had when she was going to school, to be able to interact and to have that social interaction. But we can't do that in this environment. Can't do it in COVID. It's not possible. But how do we get those parents back to work unless we all do the right thing? This is not a political imperative, Mr. President. This is not an issue that can be politicized. This is a moral imperative. You have to do the right things for the right reasons, even if you don't care about yourself. Mr. President, I spent maybe the last couple of weeks moving around the country doing different things as part of this entire management process of COVID and for the sector. I am still blown away at the number of persons, Mr. President, who are not wearing their mask. They are not visitors. They are not part of the tourism economy. I am still blown away, Mr. President, by the number of people who liming as though there's no tomorrow altogether. I'm still blown away, Mr. President, by the young man who looked at me one day when he was standing in close proximity to two other young ladies in the Grantley Adams International Airport as an employee to say he doesn't have to wear his mask because if he gets COVID, the government will pay for a free vacation for him in a hotel. He told me so in English. That's what the attitude is, Mr. President. How do you hold a country hostage? How do you hold other people hostage to mindsets like that? What do you do, Mr. President? So I accept the arguments, Mr. President, made by Senator Rogers and Senators Maynard about the importance of us being able to get past this point in order to be able to do investments of this nature. But I can say at the same time, Mr. President, that while the BTII does not fall under the Ministry of Tourism, but under the Ministry of Investment, that my own experience in the tourism sector, and certainly in interacting with all of the other agencies, there is still a high level of interest in investment in Barbados. And what does that mean? It means that the community tourism of which I spoke and Senator Drake spoke subsequently is a real thing, but it is not going to be enough on its own. So I don't agree that we can move away from any one thing and move away into something else, because ultimately, that's by definition diversification into multiple aspects of the same sector. All must contend, because the level of earning, the level of income, the level of revenue, and the level of the cost, the standard of living that you can attain must be able to go from either community tourism or mass-based tourism or heritage tourism, specialist tourism, whatever it is. You have to be able to allow people different income earning capacities and not limit them to the cap of a community. People have to be able to aspire. And that is what I would want to say in response to that. But finally, Mr. President, I take the opportunity as well to speak to Barbados developing a sustainable tourism product. This week I happen to be also acting Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy. And so I will share on this occasion that I'm sure that the Honorable Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy has spoken on more than one occasion about the special maritime areas which are being designated across the country. And that is part of the overall approach to sustainable tourism. It is unfortunate that sometimes, despite having heard these things said here and in the other place and in public and as part of policy announcements, that we say, well, we haven't heard anything about these things. These are policy initiatives that have been made by the Ministry of Maritime and Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, and they have been spoken about in great detail. Especially managed marine areas, all of those are things on which they have been working. Certainly from the Ministry of Tourism's perspective, we are presently in the process of drafting a new piece of legislation specifically on sustainable tourism, simply because, in our view, those things need to be linked with the pre-existing concessional arrangements which have always been there, including the mechanisms like the Tourism Development Act. We see properties, for example, that are on the coastline. We spoke about the windows to the sea, but beyond the windows to the sea, we're seeing so many properties who are redeveloping on the coastline, but they're simultaneously working with marine companies to build groins and so on to protect the beaches. And we're seeing more and more of the companies doing, more and more hotels are doing that. And it has been a recommendation, in fact, from members of the industry to say this is something that they would like to see incorporated in the Sustainable Tourism Act. So those are very much things which are being worked on. Mr. President, I have every confidence that this resolution, once passed, and that once the RFP invitations have been acted on, and that many of the people who have been speaking about what they would like to see actually act on that and make submissions, that we will have the benefit of the rich discourse that we have had in this chamber take actual effect by way of responses to the RFPs. Because let us be clear, very often you hear people say, but why a Barbadian didn't get that, why we didn't get, we hear that, but why didn't we apply? Why didn't we submit a request? And the only way to have a seat at the table is to submit a proposal, to work with labor, capital, and creativity, and all the ideas to submit an actual proposal. And I would wish to encourage all of those who want to make a contribution with the Glendary site and all of the others that I spoke about that are in the newspaper today to get actively involved beyond standing on the sidelines and make your representation by way of an actual proposal. And I look forward to seeing what that looks like and how we are able to move forward with heritage tourism in this particular site. And with those few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do now pass.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. The question is that this resolution do now pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This resolution is duly passed. Announcements. Thank you. You just have to announce if you want.
To announcements by Your Honor, the President.
Honourable senators, this morning in the announcements, I read a message from the Honourable the House of Assembly, and during the course of the day, there have been a number of senators expressing interest in serving on the Joint Select Committee. Those persons indicated are as you recall, the invitation to the Honourable Senate was to have 6 persons representing the Honourable Senate on that committee, along with the 8 from the House of Assembly. And those persons will represent the, will reflect the composition of the Honourable Senate in terms of government, opposition, and independent senators. And those persons will therefore be Senator Cummins, Senator Dr. Holder, Senator Sands, Senator Franklin, Senator Wiggins, and Senator Hunt. Accordingly, this is the message which will be transmitted to the Honourable House of Assembly, and it will read as follows. Message from the Honourable Senate to the Honourable House of Assembly. The Honourable Senate has the honour to extend its compliments to the Honourable House of Assembly and to reply to the message from the House inviting the Senate to appoint 6 members to a Joint Select Committee on the National Vending Bill 2021. The Honourable the Senate is pleased to appoint Senator Honourable Lisa R. Cummins, Senator Dr. Lynette P. Holder, Senator Damian Sands, Senator Caswell Franklin, Senator Julian Hunt, Senator Althea Wiggins, to constitute the Joint Select Committee with the Honourable the House and to offer every good wish for the deliberations of the committee. Dated this 8th of September 2021, and I will sign as President of the Senate. Right. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Senate is now suspended. Sign the die.
Adjourned.
This is the end. This being the end of public business, government business for the day.
The question is that the Honourable Senate do now adjourn, sign the die. Those Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. May think the ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned.